Hi, this is Brendan Davis from the Bedrock blog and Bedrock Games, and I want to talk today about some really basic things, note keeping as a game master and organizing notebooks. This is something I've blogged about in the past. It's something I believe strongly in. I think that taking notes is really important while you're playing, and I think that keeping yourself organized is really important while you're playing, and in between games. I don't, sometimes you can't tend to that. There's certainly moments where I'm not as diligent as I ought to be, but it's one of these things where I know when I take notes, I'm always thankful that I have them. And I want to apologize again. I mentioned in my previous video, this is the same day I've filmed this as my last video. There's a lawnmower going or something, and I live in an area where there's a lot of sounds, a lot of people, and I can't always control the external environment here. So we just kind of have to make do with it. I don't think that the lawnmower sounds are going to quit anytime soon. It's number one, it's Father's Day. Number two, it's Sunday, and there's it's just something that in my neighborhood, you know, yard work is a very very frequent sound. People working on motorcycles and cars and things like that is a very common sound. And as you heard from the Return to Condor Heroes video, there's a lot of music so really I apologize for that. Maybe at some point I'll be able to get a mic that can dampen some of these environmental sounds, but we'll just kind of have to put up with it. So note taking to me is just it's a very essential part of what you need to do when you're running a game, and I think that begins before the game starts. I mean, you can use any kind of paper you want. I've developed a real fondness for the stone paper notebooks, partly because they flow so well. When you write on them, it's so smooth. It's different than any other surface. And I'm not normally one of these people that goes in for like premium paper and pencils. I'm not a guy that's got like all the the rows and rows of the specialty pens and pencils for mapping and rulers. I do everything. I got a single pen that I use for pretty much everything, and it's all chicken scratch. But this really, I just find my writing is actually easier to do. It's easier to take notes on this paper in my experience. So that's why I use it. But you can use any notebook of any size. I find one this size works. There's also you can get reporting notebooks. They're sort of oblong and rectangular. And the great thing about those is you can hold them in your hand and write, and they've got a firm back, so they're really an easy way to take notes while you're talking to people and that sort of thing. The only downside to them is they tend to be more pricey, so I don't tend to buy those. They're great for reporters in the field, and they can certainly be useful to a game master, I think. But I've generally found them to be a little bit too expensive. Whereas these stone paper books are actually pretty affordable. They're about the right size. And what I like to do, I'm struggling to find an example, but what I like to do is I like to start by putting the title of the campaign, the date, and even the time or the day. Usually when you go back and you look through these, it's really important to have that kind of information. It's really helpful to know what day you took your notes on. And this is just sort of a random example, but this is just kind of events that occurred in the course of a game. There were money exchanged hands, so I noted down how much money, and there were characters that were introduced, so I tried to keep their names on hand. Anytime I don't write down the name of a character, I always regret it. So again, I think you always want to, I think, take notes of things, whether it's an NPC that you've introduced, something as simple as a transaction. If the players buy a boat, you want to be able to remember the name of the boat, you want to be able to remember how much they spent on it and what, where they got it. Some of that stuff you can remember, especially if you go to it right after the game. I just really like to write as much down as I can. And again, you will miss details. You're not, this isn't, you're not going to be, you will be quizzed on it in the form of the players, saying, "Hey, last week when we got the boat, what was that guy's name again?" So you will be quizzed on it, but it's not like, I think most players will be forgiving if you forget a detail that was very quickly dealt with and maybe not considered significant at the time. But I like to get as much of that down as I can. So I take notes during the game. I have a master list of NPCs that I am constantly updating, and it has a column that indicates whether they're alive or dead. Then it has a descriptive area for them. I don't do any stats on this sheet. This is just purely, who is this person? Are they alive? And where, what's their deal? Why do I care about this person in the campaign? What do they do? And every time something happens with them, I just add another sentence. It's not meant to be a beautiful thing. It's just purely for informational purposes. And then I'll have separate stat block entries for my NPCs. But I find that having this master table of my NPCs is very useful. I got the idea from somebody online that was posting on Google Plus, and if I I don't want to post a link because I don't have the permission, but it wasn't something that I thought to do myself. Somebody else pointed this out as a great technique, and I found that to be absolutely true. I started using it regularly, maybe I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago at this point, and it's just something that I have not stopped doing since. It's very handy. Before that I used to do a Rolodex of cards, which also is a good method, but I really like the table method now. I think it's simpler. It's, with computers and word processors, it's just easier to update, and I think it works really well. So another thing that I like to do with my notes is keep track of combat. Now, I'm trying to find a page here where I have okay, so this probably means nothing to you, but to me this meant a great deal. This was, initiative order. I have wound totals and things of that nature on the sheet. You can write down, when somebody uses a particular, spell, or in the case of the game that I was running, a kung fu technique. It's just when you, if you, I like to do campaign logs, and having this information in my notes makes it much easier to do the campaign log. I'm notoriously bad when it comes to combat and remembering exactly the sequence of events. So the more notes I take, the better off I am. And I think if I just did a round by round, rundown as combat unfolded, I'd probably be much better off in the end. But combat's probably one of the more dynamic things that you have to keep track of during play. So it's also, I think, the hardest to take active notes during. But ideally, I'm taking very regular notes as combat unfolds. Now, beyond just note taking, which I think is just, if you're not going to do anything else, do the note taking, because that way you'll at least have, anything that happens during the game, you'll have it written down. But the notebook is also really important, and I'm a big believer in the notebook. This is my current campaign notebook. I probably do get a little bit of overkill. It's pretty hefty. Now, this is just my main campaign notebook. I have other notebooks which are not easily grabbable at the moment, but they're smaller, and they're for the individual campaigns in the setting. So this is more like the bulk of my setting material, where I can organize everything by region. And usually how I end up doing that over time evolves. But basically, this is by and large, what this is NPCs, sects, organizations, and then regions of the world with all of the locations in those regions. I also have a section at the beginning for major events and things of that nature. In my other notebook, I have my campaign calendar, and that's a month by month calendar where I can keep track of days that go by, and keep track of events that happen and plans that it's basically it looks like a day timer, and it's just I 3-hole punch each month put it in the front of the campaign folder, and as the campaign progresses, I just mark down each day that passes. When the players say, hey, I send a message to so-and-so, I note that, and then I usually put a note to myself, like when the message might be received or when they'll get word back of how that went. I find that to be one of the more useful tools as a GM. It's very easy if players start sending out feelers or doing all kinds of little sending out minions to do things. Very easy to lose track. And if you have a day timer like arrangement at the start of your campaign binder, that's just a great way to keep track of those things. And and again, like with note taking, when I get lax with that, that's when my campaign gets messy because I'm not organized. So note taking, time tracking, keeping track of your NPCs. Those I think are the key things. I think that really prevent disorder in a campaign. I mean, there are obviously lots of other things you have to do as a GM, but just in terms of organization, for me, those are the key things. What I also like to do for myself, and maybe I will try to see if I can get one of my campaign binders here. Here we go. So this is an example of a more recent, newer campaign, and as you can see, let's see here. This would be, and I tend to doodle, so just ignore the doodles. But that's how I've been doing my campaign calendar, and that's just 1 month. Those are days that passed. I have some notes about some weather conditions that were going to occur. I think that's the first month the campaign started in. So that's really handy. But one thing that I also like to do is I like to make note. I don't like to. I'm not a big plot point guy. I don't think in terms of scenes or okay, X is going to happen, then Y is going to happen. I think more in terms of okay, these NPCs are doing this. This group is doing this. This is what the players seem to be doing. So I'll make all these preparations. But I like having intelligent moving parts in the game that can react to all the things that are going on, and it just create a more fluid interplay between NPCs, PCs, and campaign developments. So any events that happen, I don't think of as scenes. I think of them as, hey, Joe the Butcher wants to go and do this, so this is going to happen because Joe the Butcher wants it to happen, not because I, the scriptwriter, want it to happen. I think that that's a subtle distinction, but I think it is an important one. I'm not saying that it's wrong to do it the other way, but I just prefer to have the events flow from all of the groups and characters in the game. And so at the start of each session, the first thing I do before each game is I make a campaign event list. It's usually a bullet pointed list. It's usually not quite this monochrome. Usually there's like multiple entries with headers because I have a lot of things going on. So let me see if I can give you an example here. So it's normally more like this. I have a bunch of different pieces in play, and they're all, it's basically notes to me saying, okay, Shanhu, this is a character in the game. This is what she wants to do. Lord Frog he's one of my villains. These are the things that he's trying to do. This is what happened to him. This is what he's going to attempt next session. Divine Horse Sect, this is what they're up to. So it just gives me an overview of things that at the start of the game, I run through this to make sure I'm not forgetting anything, and I try to keep these things in mind as the game is going because they could be important, and I don't want to forget about them and then have, have the players go somewhere that's supposed to be in flames or something, and I forget that it's in flames, and it doesn't come up during play, and then I either have to nix that idea or I have to, really. I don't like to do this, but like say, hey, that town you went to, it was on fire when you went there. If I forget, I figure then it didn't happen because it's sort of my responsibility to keep those things in mind and in play. So this is where I tend to put my my NPC stat block entries, and occasionally I don't normally do like adventure type things, but every once in a while I have a section in my binder for adventures. So if I'm going to do something that's like an investigative adventure, and I want that to be a possibility, I will usually kind of type it out with maps and notes and put it in there. Typically, my adventures tend to be more free-form, location, NPC based, but sometimes I have like a murder mystery, and I'll set that up as almost like a little mini module in my notebook. But as you can see here, I only have two of those in this whole campaign, so it doesn't really come up that much. And then what I also like to do is at the back of the binder, my campaign binder. So this is my Profound Masters thing. So I have all my mechanical information on the that's relevant to that campaign. All the kung fu techniques, the major immortal powers and weapons and rituals and all that stuff. So I like to have a section devoted to the mechanics. And in my main binder is where I'll put like magical objects, that sort of thing. So yeah, so that's how I like to organize campaigns. As you could see, my main notebook is fairly hefty. So what I've done is I've acquired almost like a little portable podium, I think it's technically a breakfast tray that you might see in like a hospital, but I found that it's really useful for putting a heavy binder on. So if you find that your binder is getting too big and you need something to put it on that isn't gonna like throw your back out during play, because I find just leaning over and flipping through it sometimes is a nightmare. Look into hospital style bed trays. I don't know what the precise terminology for them is, but when I got this, I just looked. I think I googled hospital bed tray, and I found a cheap one that had like a pivoting thing so that I could turn it around and do what I want. So that way, I could if I wanted to. I wouldn't do this, but if I wanted to, I could literally run a game in bed with this thing. So if I had a more portable camera, I'd show you. Notebook, take notes, campaign notebook, and then I like to have a main world notebook. I don't think there's any wrong way to do this. I know GMs, this is literally all they do during a session, and they're better GMs than me half the time. So I don't think that this is. I don't think that you have to do the notebook thing if it's not your style, especially if you have a style of play where recording events is not super important. If it's not the kind of sort of like, there's a big difference between a long-term fantasy campaign where the players are really exploring a made-up world, and you have to constantly keep track of all the different elements, and like a 6-month campaign that's really more focused on a storyline. And so I think for the latter, people probably would rely on different sets of tools, and I don't really run games like that so much. Sometimes when I do my my Crime Network games, they do tend to play that way because I like them to be sort of mini campaigns, but even those I tend to set up as a little bit more like this. It's more about the groups, the NPCs, and all that stuff. But again, I don't have to be quite as organized because the time frame is so much more condensed. I really do think that organization is important. For me, I think it's part of it is my memory isn't what it used to be as I get older. So the older I get, I find the more I have to be on top of note taking and all that stuff. When I was younger, I probably could have blown off a lot more of this stuff. So if you're like 22, maybe this is not as important to you. But now that I'm 40, it's definitely just with I don't know. I just find that if I don't do this, I will forget things. So writing things down is imperative. All right. So next video, I'm debating whether I'm going to be talking about Lady Hermit or Tai Chi Master and Swordsman 2. I might do Lady Hermit first. I have a series of videos where I'm talking about the different wuxia movies that influenced Wandering Heroes of Ogre Gate, and Lady Hermit is a film I really like, so I think I might do that first, but we'll see. And I posted up some other ones recently, so you can check those out. And hopefully my next video there won't be so much weed whacker and lawnmower sound going on. I appreciate anybody who stuck around till the end of the video. I know that that's distracting. It was certainly distracting to me. So hopefully we won't have quite as many of those sounds in the future. And again, comment in the bottom if you disagree with me, if you think I'm a chump. Feel free, put it down there. I will not debate you. I'm not going to antagonize anybody that challenges me or disagrees. I want people to feel comfortable expressing their views. I think that's important, and I just don't need the headache of arguing with folks as well. I think if people disagree with me, they disagree. There's not really much I can say to dissuade them. I'm happy to have a conversation. So if it's more conversational, I'll certainly weigh in. And I'm happy to compliment any posts that I think are insightful or add something. And I certainly do invite discordant viewpoints. So if you hate taking notes, I'd really like to hear your point of view. If you think that taking notes in organization like I'm doing really mires the GM and chains them, I'm certainly interested in hearing that viewpoint. So certainly feel free. And hopefully I'll do more videos like this. I like talking about GMing tools and stuff like that. I don't know how interesting that is to other people, but to me, just going on about binders all day is something that if you follow the blog, you see I easily do. So we'll see. Maybe I'll talk about dice or something next, because that's another subject that I've been thinking about a lot. So, all right, I will talk to you later, and have a nice day.